To the first annual University of California Esports Initiative Symposium. Hold on while I mute this just a second. All right. Um, my name is Mark Deppy, coming to you live from the UCI Esports Arena, and I have the honor of serving as UC Irvine's Director of Esports. The UC Esports Initiative began during the pandemic in 2020 as a way for UC students and colleagues to come together for friendly competition during the lockdown. Our planning group is composed of students and staff from all 9 UC campuses with undergraduate students. UC schools are all at their heart research universities, fundamentally committed to the creation and sharing of knowledge. Our goal today is to talk about 2 topics firmly on the minds of people in the esports world. All of the folks involved today are subject matter experts and with the degrees and experience to prove it. Our first panel will look at the current business state of the esports industry, led by Dr. Henrik Cronquist. Dr. Henrik Cronquist is the Professor J. and Carolyn A. Waltos Dean and Professor of Finance at Chapman University's George L. Argyros School of Business and Economics. He received a PhD in finance from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business and an MS in Business and Economics from Stockholm School of Economics. Previously, Dr. Cronquist was Vice Dean of University of Miami Herbert Business School, Zonquin Group Chair at China Europe International Business School, and McMahon Family Chair at Claremont McKenna College. He started his academic career at The Ohio State University, where he received the Fisher College Business Pacesetter Award for Excellence in Research. He is an award-winning researcher with a distinguished record of publications on topics focused on investors' behaviors examined from a variety of cultural and social determinants. Our second panel, which will discuss health and wellness among esports athletes, was originally going to be led by Dr. Bowen Chung from UCLA. Unfortunately, due to some major flight delays in Europe, he's unable to join us today. In his stead, the panel will be led by Dr. Ryan Terrell. Dr. Terrell, a clinical esports psychologist specializing in work with esports athletes, coaches, and organizations, helps develop their competitive identities to learn how to regulate thoughts, feelings, and behaviors to better perform online and in real life. He is a doctor of clinical psychology from the Azusa Pacific University. As there's no one path for success, Ryan seeks to understand his clients' life context, values, and style to support their goals and strive toward their own win conditions. Thank you to all these awesome folks for lending their time and expertise and for recruiting the panelists you will meet shortly. UCI has thrown numerous symposium and academic esports conferences over the years. At each of those, we have put an emphasis on discussing diversity in the esports community as well as the challenges and opportunities related to access and inclusion. It is always our goal to assemble experts from a diverse set of backgrounds and who will share their knowledge and experiences. It was also our hope to have a third panel today to directly discuss diversity, equity, inclusion in our world. Due to some late cancellations, we are not able to meet those original goals. Please know that you have my personal commitment to continuing to make this a topic and a priority and highlighting the amazing people who contribute to the rich world of esports. The format for today will include 2 presentations and panel discussions. If you'd like to ask a question, please type it into the Twitch chat, and we'll select some of those questions to send to the speakers to be answered at the end of each of their sections. We'll have breaks between all the speakers for folks to stretch and grab some water. Thank you to the UCEI Planning Committee. I'm very proud today that all the stream, graphics, social media marketing were all done by amazing students at UCI and UCLA. And I'd like to offer special thanks to Kayla Gerbach and Vivian Lamb for running today's broadcast. And now, without any further ado, we'll take a quick break while we get our speakers in the first panel, and I will see you at the end.
Hello, everyone. I'm Henrik Cronqvist. I'm the Dean of the arduous College of Business and Economics at Chapman University in Southern California. And I'm thrilled to be leading this panel today on the business of esports and the current state of the industry. And I have three amazing guests that are joining us here from different parts of the world, actually. And so let me just briefly introduce our guests here. So we have Matt Archambault, and Matt is head of commercial partnerships for the Americas and for OCE with Riot Games. We also have Jason Chung, who is the director of the Esports and Gaming Initiative, and also clinical professor at New York University. And last but not least, we also have Wim Stocks, who is EVP at Belong Gaming and Vindex. All right, panelists, so let's get started here. Some people, they have a narrative related to esports and there being a winter in the esports space. What's our take on that? I don't personally necessarily agree with that, but I would be really curious to see what you guys have to say about it. So let's kick it off. Maybe Matt, you want to start?
However, I honestly, I think it's a bit of a misnomer in many ways, and I think that there's a discussion of there's an esports winter and then esports spring is coming, and then we're going to have summer and then fall and go through this. But in many ways, I think like that the gaming ecosystem, esports, there continues to be more and more attention, more people playing, more people engaging within that. I think a lot of the way that some investments in the VC community were done within esports teams and other areas, like that has changed, right? Like those rules tend to change. And I think a lot of that has gotten us to a place where we just assume, oh, sky is falling, it's all over, it's all done. I can tell you right now, like Worlds, League of Legends is happening in Korea. I don't see that as getting any smaller. If anything, I see that getting bigger and bigger. And if I'm a little tired, it's because I was up all night watching everything in Korea. Um, but I think a lot of ways here, I do think it's a misnomer. We still have a lot of investment, particularly on the community side. I know Wim can dive into that. I'm sure Jason can talk about it from an educational standpoint as well, just like you, Henrik. But I think you continue to see more and more excitement around it, more stuff happening. But like anything going on, I'm sure everyone here on this and everyone in the audience, I don't know how many conversations have there been about AI in the last week, right? And so everyone starts thinking about that. It's a fun sizzle project, so everyone gets excited, but it's not going anywhere. Gaming esports is here. It continues to be there. We continue to have a ton of interest from partners. I'm going on a tangent. I will stop and let the rest of my cohorts jump in and add more color.
All right, that's quite all right. So, Jason, what's your take? Is there an esports winter, or are we in the springtime, or was there ever one? And also, what caused this esports winter, if there was one?
Yeah, I think Matt's answer makes perfect sense from a publisher standpoint. I think where you are in the ecosystem and also where you sit geographically really makes a difference here, right? So Asia, from what I understand, is doing perfectly fine compared to North America, and obviously publishers, are doing okay. Let's put it that way, right? But when you're talking about esports organizations and the teams and the competitive side of things in North America, at least, yes, there's been a lot of trouble. There's been a lot of consolidation in the space if you're optimistic, and frankly just complete shutdowns if you're going to be pessimistic about it, right? And I think what's leading that is the fact that most of these esports organizations, from a team perspective, they were dependent on advertising and sponsorship for revenue. And what happens when the economy is a little bit uncertain and sponsors and advertisers get a little squirrely about their spend? Obviously, it gets diminished a little bit. And also, I think esports was also responsible for overhyping the industry maybe a little bit at the beginning, right? Maybe saying, hey, we're going to bring in all these Gen Z and maybe even Gen Alpha viewers, and you're going to make money hand over fist. But that hasn't really proven to be the case right away, at the very least. So I think really how it's framed and positioned for that audience is really important. And maybe there's a correction that's happening. And I share the sentiment with Matt. I don't think it's doom and gloom, but I do think that we're in the beginning to middle stages of a winter, but that winter always leads to some good stuff as well, some hot chocolate. So maybe a little bit of reorganization. So that's never a bad thing.
Maybe that's what Wim was drinking there. Maybe that was the hot chocolate. Wim, you have been
It
around for
was
a while in this industry, so tell us, what's your take?
well, and both Jason and Matt gave great answers and really are elements of what we're experiencing right now in terms of esports. I've done a few talks along these lines, and I think we even for this panel we had a little prep session a week or so ago, and I think we all aligned on that. One of our goals for this panel should be the fact that we're dispelling the death of esports. So many, especially from the investment side, so many have sort of landed there. But just the opposite in my way of thinking and view is that there's never been more energy around esports, especially in the areas where it's most needed. And this is the talk that I give about how esports really got built upside down. If you think about traditional sports, it's the pros at the elite levels, it's the foundational, the developmental, the amateur, the scholastic at the lower levels. What happened was that it was the elite levels that got going so quickly that really there was not a lot of time or effort given to support the developmental layers when with no developmental layers, no funnels, no clear path for how a player gets from the lower ranks into the more elite layers. There's the whole ecosystem is fragile, and as a result, when things started to go, and I think many of us could see this coming, that as the models around the elite levels sort of were proving not to be the best models without the support from amateurs and developmental, and today the scholastic is really at least in terms of North America has become the infrastructure and the funnels and the development and the foundational layers needed to have a healthy ecosystem and to support and feed the upper layers. So I just spoke to a group of HBCU administrators who are all in on esports, and they were frankly freaking out that they had invested their time and their energy and their school's funding to build esports programs, and I had to get on my soapbox and say, no, you're in the right place. This is where the energy and the momentum is coming for esports, is where it needs to happen. That is at the developmental, foundational, scholastic level. So again, I think we'll right the ship. It's not going to be immediate. Jason's word correction is definitely something we're going through, but these foundational levels and layers will make the whole ecosystem far more healthy, and that's something that has been needed, and I fully believe we're on a good track in that regard.
So I think one headline that we have seen in Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, all of those different business media has been about the deal of Microsoft involving Activision and Blizzard. So, how does that deal, and now the completion of that deal, from a business perspective and from the perspective of the industry, how will this deal change the landscape, if at all? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? I'm really curious about that. So, Matt, do you have a point of view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's positive, to be honest. I mean, look, like you're all the tactical elements, the stuff that's like really beneath the weeds, right? That you're not going to see in the headlines and everything, all need to kind of come out, right? And we'll see where all those puzzle pieces kind of come together. But I think from a general perspective, at least for myself and some of my colleagues, like there's excitement, right? Like, ooh, this is interesting. This is really great. Like there's a lot happening here. Where are we going to go? Like, of course, getting through the hurdles of the competition side and everything else, right? All the legality that needs to be there. But I think, in general, like I see it as a positive. There's people I know at Activision, at Blizzard, at Microsoft as well, and everyone seems to be excited. Of course, with any big change, there's always the, well, what's going to happen? But I think right now we're still at that phase of, it looks great. It's great to see the continued investment and the build into it. Obviously, we've seen Sony invest into other places and other things, so you're definitely seeing a bit of that kind of the old school, like Google, Apple slash Alphabet, Apple situation probably happening to some degree. But yeah, I think generally speaking, like, I think it's going to be really exciting. But of course, the devil's in the details, right? Like, let's see what that actually means once the rubber hits the road, once all this stuff really comes into play.
Oh, that makes sense. So Jason, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think this is good or bad for the industry?
I get to give my favorite lawyer answer ever, which is basically it depends. It really depends, honestly. I mean, if you're looking at it from a completely neutral standpoint, Microsoft is one of the biggest companies in the world. Them coming into the space in a more aggressive manner, trying to align their business activities, especially with what they're doing with Xbox and Game Pass, and seeing if esports is a big part of what they want to do. That's an exciting thing to look at. If there's money to be made, I think Microsoft will be there. If it's a good marketing expense, I think Microsoft will be there. But at the same time, they didn't get to be one of the largest companies in the world without making a few tough choices. So if they feel that ultimately esports is great for, maybe the competition like Riot and Tencent and, Valve, but we don't want to really get involved, then I think that's going to have to be something that we look out for as an industry. And I think that one of the things that we're seeing, and going back to Wim's point before, is that, when we're talking about professional esports, there really was no real strong base in North America for it. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that there wasn't interest and that people don't care. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that if you look at traditional sports and sport business, I mean, it was built on the back of collegiate sports, right? So, your favorite players went to a Princeton or a Harvard in the old Ivy League days or something, or you went to Michigan, you played, collegiate football, which was way bigger than professional football. And then eventually they went to the semi-pro league and the pro league. But there was this progression, right? You got to see the pipeline. There was a built-in base of fans that could eventually get professionalized and tribalized for way longer than a 4-year collegiate career. We didn't have the luxury of that in esports. We just sort of came in and said, hey, look, we have this game. By the way, we finally got the technology to actually have, good online matchmaking, and we can actually contemplate this. Let's just throw a professional league on top of it. So we're dealing with the growing pains of that, I think, right? And, if I might, going back to the original question that you had, Henrik, I mean, if at the end of the day, if you're really thinking about it from Microsoft's standpoint, I would hope that they have that understanding, and the fact that they actually do have a long way. They have a large role in actually being able to grow a big ecosystem. And by the way, a seat at the table of growing potentially the 5th major league sport in North America, right? If you're looking at it from an aggregate point of view, obviously there's a lot of different titles, but there's an opportunity here, but it's not going to come without some cost, and it's definitely not going to come without some time, because we've lost decades of development compared to collegiate sports in traditional sports.
Wim, what's your perspective on this?
Well, I'm not an attorney, so I wouldn't know how to make a legal response if my life depended on it. So I will give you my personal opinion. Been involved with both Activision Blizzard and Microsoft for a long time. What's really interesting is that if you look at the history of esports and esports support, of course, Activision Blizzard is head and shoulders above many publishers in that regard. The investment first and foremost in Overwatch League and then ultimately Call of Duty League, two really interesting models. The first time franchising, city-based franchising was implemented. As Jason and Matt mentioned, those models weren't perfect. Part of what we're going through right now has to do with the fact those models weren't working effectively. But nonetheless, it was a huge initiative for Activision Blizzard. If you contrast that to Microsoft's history in esports, there really is none, other than Halo. But Halo is a 343 initiative. It's not a Microsoft initiative. So it's really interesting to see now with Microsoft having these two big esports assets being Call of Duty League and Overwatch League, Overwatch League already, as I think everyone is aware, no one knows what's going to happen from here. This past month, Overwatch League Grand Finals in Toronto. I happen to be there. I'm part of a small part of an ownership group that owns the New York teams, and there's no certainty as to what will happen with Overwatch in the next season. It's certainly not going to be the same structure as it is today. And no one really knows. We're sort of on the inside. No one really knows what the structure is going to be ultimately. So a really interesting contrast. I know Microsoft knows and appreciates the value that has been built around esports especially for Call of Duty and Overwatch League. But think of StarCraft. Think of how that goes back even further. But it remains to be seen what Microsoft's going to do with it, and a lot of people and a lot of investors are really intrigued as to what this merger will mean going forward from a Microsoft strategy around esports. Forza getting some more energy, but again, those are studio initiatives, and they're not necessarily Microsoft initiatives. So again, there's a lot of speculation, but there's no question Microsoft, if they think about this properly, they'll arrive at a great spot for building onto what Activision Blizzard started with a number of these pro leagues.
So I think one thing maybe we should have started with this question, because I think our audience here has a bunch of professionals like all of you that are on the panel here. You have been in the industry for a long time and you know this really well. But we probably have a few audience members as well that are just learning to know this industry from a business perspective. So we talk about esports and we talk about gaming. Okay, so it's not the same thing, obviously. So help us out here, dissect the full sort of gaming industry here and how esports fits into it from a business perspective. Maybe we'll start with Jason this time.
I mean, gaming is the world's largest entertainment sector, right? I mean, what is it, 160, $180 billion globally? Bigger than film, bigger than music, bigger than both of them combined, actually, right? If you look at it, so gaming is everything, and gaming is something that everyone does, right? If you know, and for the people that are on this panel, but also the people that are watching, you know, if your mom plays Candy Crush, guess what? She's a gamer. You know, maybe not in the traditional sense that we think of with Doritos and Mountain Dew, to shout out a few quasi-endemic sponsors, but gaming is pretty ubiquitous, right? That's what we do. But esports is a very, very small offshoot of it, and it's the elite competitive gaming, elite competitive multiplayer gaming, team-based, and we're talking about a very short history as well. You know, quite frankly, we didn't really have the technology to do sort of broad-based matchmaking even as recently as the late 90s. You know what I mean? And so when you're talking about modern esports and not just a bunch of people in a room playing a game together, you know, we're looking at maybe StarCraft in Korea in the 90s. And then really in terms of what we're talking about recently, we're talking about, internet-based play with global matchmaking that then can turn into team-based play. That's not a very long history. I mean, even with League of Legends, but what are we talking about here, Matt? Like 12, 13 years, just about, right? That's not a very long history, right? And so there has been a great, it's been a very fast rise to become a commercial activity that people are watching. And in fact, we're talking about, 500 million people around the world watching competitive esports. But ultimately, it's a small fraction of the number of people that will actually engage in gaming, right? Esports, 1 billion, I think, maybe. And we're talking about gaming. I mean, we're talking about a small offshoot here.
Matt, how would you characterize the industry? So Jason has a lot of statistics and data in his description. What's your way of describing the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what Jason's saying, it's spot on, right? And I think that's also the legacy of what we are building and creating within just gaming in general, and now the competitive ecosystem, right, from an esports side of it. It's very new, right? You look at traditional sports, you have hundreds of years, right? Like, trust me, growing up, I'm also not 7 years old, and I know this panel isn't either. Hopefully no one watching is 7, at least 13. But I think generally speaking, though, like, we all have seen sports that we love, traditional sports, football, soccer, whatever, have good years, bad years, things like that. And everyone's, it's taken a really long time. So when you start to think about this, I think a lot of this also goes back to kind of to Wim's point and to also what Jason was saying, like, you need to build the foundation. The foundation is gaming. It is, I have friends, my mom, my cousins, they pick up Candy Crush, they're a gamer, right? Like that is what it is it can be anything from casual to maybe a little bit more of like the pickup basketball games or flag football type stuff, right? Or even just going out with your buddies and skins for golf, right? Something like that. Like that's still in many ways just quote unquote gaming. Then there's the continued sort of esports side where it's, this is a life pursuit. This is something I want to do. This can become maybe more of a career. I'm really like, I'm grinding away. I am playing this. This is what I want. It's not just a thing I might pick up on a Tuesday because I need a break, right? Which you could be a great gamer and pick things up. And there's a million different titles for that type of thing. But I think as you start to get into that, this is a sport, right? Education is always a big question. And when we'll talk to partners, we'll talk to brands, we'll talk to others, everyone will be like, yeah, but like, what do these kids do regularly? Like, what's their real job? I'm like, this is what they do, right? Like, you don't look at LeBron and say, hey, I'm glad you're playing. Like, what do you do on a Tuesday? Like, he's probably practicing or thinking about basketball to get better at the thing that he's doing, right? So I think that's kind of the analogy here as well, is that you start to build up the foundation. You can have gamers that can be engaged. It can be competitive, but not super competitive. Then esports is really that kind of culmination of, it's the top of the top, right? I think there's is it National Car Rental? It's always like like we graduate thousands of players from college, but only like 1% go pro. I mean, that's the reality of it. There's still only 1% or probably even less than that per Jason's math that actually can go pro. But yeah, I mean, I think gaming is the encapsulating umbrella. That is not going anywhere. The data is there. Nerds are winning. That is where we are. We're taking over the world little by little. And then you have the life pursuit of, I can actually do this. This is all I want to do, right? And you can learn that and develop those skills, personal skills, interpersonal skills, professional skills. And that's really where I think people can manifest. And I think that's kind of the difference. They're all encapsulating, but it is a segment within that group.
Wim, how do you view, esports as part of the broader gaming industry? How would you explain to perhaps those that are not so knowledgeable about the industry?
Well, the one thing, I'll take a little different tact here is, and I've been in the gaming business for over 30 years, and in the early days, and really when I say early days, really through the 90s even, the gaming had a stigma. There was a stigma around gaming as a player. The schools and the teachers who were involved, your families. It was not something. Everyone's been through this. The notion of someone sitting in their basement with their headsets on and eating Cheetos. How many times we heard this? There was definitely, no one saw the value of it. Nobody saw. Everyone thought it was not only detrimental, it could actually harm you from too much involvement with gaming. And the one thing that I think esports has done a lot, believe me, but the one thing I think it's done for gaming is elevated gaming from the perception of value and what it means to be a gamer. And it took something like esports to, when parents could say, well, what? My son could be a millionaire if he's a really good player. And now the schools are teaching gaming, and a lot of schools got involved with teaching gaming and esports because of esports. Not completely the motivation that scholastically was getting involved in gaming and esports. But by and large, what esports did was to elevate the stature of gaming, elevate the fact that it's not a proposition for antisocial people, and not only can you make money as a player, but more importantly, you can build a career outside of being a player. What Jason mentioned, the top 1%, Matt mentioned top 1% of the pros. There's, for the 99%, there's so many ways to think about having a career in gaming. And I did a talk a while ago at MIT. MIT has a big sports management program. they're in the process of now that exact same template for sports management is now being applied to esports management. So again, I'm a huge believer in the fact that esports had a big hand, not just a little hand, a big hand in elevating and removing, eliminating, dispelling the stigma around gaming. I have a number of anecdotes about parents who accused me of corrupting their, and what I did in the industry of corrupting their children. And then finally, one woman walked up to me not that long ago and said, "I used to give you a lot of grief about gaming ruining my son. Well, now my son is a doctor. He's turned out fine. He has a son who's 7 years old who's really good at Fortnite. Could you help him become a pro?" So, I mean, that just shows how the stigma of all of this has been largely eliminated. I give true and full testimony to esports as being a big part of that.
That's great. We also want the audience to be active here and keep submitting your questions. So let me take one of the questions that is coming in now from the audience. So, and maybe Wim, you can continue to give your perspective here. So here's one question. Would you say that the esports world will continue to grow through the years? And in what ways would you hope that it would grow?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. The
go
first
ahead.
thing about esports, I'm sorry. Do you want me to go? That's okay.
Yeah, please go ahead, Wim.
The thing about esports, we use the word esports to, it's kind of like saying the word sports. It means so many different things. It means a collection of games. Every year there are more games being introduced into the esports realm, and not every game has been, many already that have tried their hand at becoming an esport. As everybody knows, it's not the publisher who decides if it's an esport or not. It's really the community of players who are playing the game that elevate it, that play it, that support it, that elevate it into becoming an esport. And it's something that the community wants to take part in and rally around. I think there's just, that's, when you think of esports in the collective, it's a huge set of IP and set of games and set of dynamics that comprise esport. It will continue to grow. It's going to continue to grow, not necessarily just from a organic viewership. It's going to grow because more and more games are going to be made for, and attempted to be made for esports. So participation is one thing. Viewership is another thing. That's the other side of to dispel the esports winner. Viewership is still up across the board for esports. That's a great thing. That's audiences. That's meaningful for brands and for sponsors and the like, and obviously for the broadcasters too. So that continues to grow, even in light of this supposed esports winner that we're in the midst of. So no, I think it continues to grow. It's broadening. There are mobile, very big mobile esports in Asia. A big part of the ecosystem over there, now starting to come more to Europe and the US. So that's a big category. More kinds of games are being competitive. More just culturally and genderly is growing as well. So I'm a little biased, but I'm here to say esports is not going anywhere and continues to grow in a really meaningful and valuable way.
So, Matt, what additional infrastructure and resources do you think that the industry needs in order for esports to be sustainable?
It's a good question. And I think one thing, just to go back to what Wim was saying, and just in general, is like, we want to continue to educate people here. Like, we often will say esports as like it's a single thing, right? Like this idea of like it's one thing. You wouldn't just say, when you say the word sport, or if you're European, or if you say sports here in the US, right? You think of tennis, basketball, baseball, badminton, golf, you name it, right? And the same thing is actually true within the gaming ecosystem. You have esports, some of them resonate really well for certain titles, of that others maybe not, right? And that's where there's that kind of differential. And so I think there's sometimes this mindset of like, esports is down. Like it might just be that there's a certain type of genre of title that needs a little additional way to engage with people differently, right? Like I look at a game like we have like TFT, where you have 8 people playing, and it's effectively an octobox, like at all times, where we know we've tried to figure out other ways to bring the broadcast out, find ways to engage with the players and creators and everything else, right? And then you have something like a League of Legends or a Valorant, where it's on a map. League, a little bit more strategic. Val is too, but it's Val, like any kind of FPS, FPA, it's like sort of right up there in your face. So I think it's not just saying what tech needs to be there for esports. It needs to be almost contained to the genre or the pillar, or what that community is really looking for, right? Every game has a slightly different way that they need to manifest data on screen or show certain visuals. And so I think there's definitely broadcast technology. There's definitely visual technology. There's ways within the viewing experience to get a little bit closer and a little bit better. People are obviously, they're watching on their phones almost all the time. In some markets, particularly on the eastern side of the world, it's very much just on your phones between your mobile games and not. And so I think there's a lot of technology there too. Same thing, a mobile game, you're playing mobile, you want to put it on Twitch or YouTube or a broadcast channel. There's got to be some tech that you need to figure out with a bunch of dongles and or other things. So as the infrastructure gets better, I think that's where we're going to see different ways to come in. But I think you're also going to see different advancements in different genres of title that are going to be more specific to what is needed with that community to really get excited about it.
So, sort of related to that, there is one question that is coming in from the audience here. So maybe, Jason, you can take a stab at that. So the question is it possible for an esports club to be sustained economically without being primarily an influencer business? That's an interesting one.
It's interesting.
Depends on where you are, I think, right? I mean, so this is my favorite. Again, sorry for the lawyer answer, but the thing about it is, look, I mean, if you're talking about Asia and with the competitive culture there, if you don't win, you're nobody, right? So, for instance, Faker can play League of Legends. He's famous for not having a personality. In fact, celebrated for not having a personality, not talking on stream, basically not doing anything, right? Except being a lethal killer in what he does, right? And that's great. And that's what works in the Asian context. That would never really work in North America, not the way we have it currently architectured. Right now, we basically merged gaming and esports and influencing into this kind of unholy mess of influencer-led gaming, marketing events, right? And that leads to some issues, right? Because ultimately, the competitive side is almost not as important as the personalities in North America right now. Right. And especially from the brand perspective, it's not as interesting right now. I mean, if I even asked you who won, Worlds or LCS last year, and you ask somebody in the middle of the street, no offense to Riot, but the thing about it is I'm sure most people wouldn't know, right? Because it's not as big a thing as it would be in Asia. So right now, I think it would be difficult. But then again, I also like to look into the future. And I think that as the infrastructure grows and as, the in-event experience and all that kind of infrastructure grows along with it, I think the answer will probably be a little bit different 5 to 10 years from now, right? I don't think that we're going to lose the personality part of North America. I mean, ultimately, North America, we're great at selling personalities and those kinds of narratives. But I think that will be supplemented by caring more about what happens, on screen, or during events or during Worlds and all that kind of stuff. I do think that there is a world where all of that fits together, but we're not quite there right now. And I wonder if Matt actually disagrees with me on this, but I can tell you that, I teach a lot of students about esports business. And, if I ask them to name 3 esports athletes and maybe 2 esports teams, sometimes it get a little dicey, and they're in my class, right? So I can only imagine what it's like even, broad in the broader sort of ecosystem for collegiate.
Well, let's see if Matt agrees or disagrees.
My answer would be it depends. I'm going to take a page from Jason, and I'm just saying that because it's also there's a lot of this from a cultural standpoint, right? I mean, and that's the reality of the games and the type of stuff that you have. There are certain genres and titles in the U.S. and in North America where you're going to see a lot more, and there's going to be a lot more interest. Or like, oh yeah, of course I know that team, or of course I'm familiar with X, Y, and Z, right? You go to other markets and they might say, I have no idea what you're talking about unless you're talking about Faker or you're talking about someone else, right? So I think there's still education at play here without a doubt. I wish in some ways that we had the scale in the U.S. that the NFL does. That would be pretty amazing, from like a weekly kind of situation and just being able to run in. I think if you look at the entire gaming ecosystem, absolutely, that trumps it. But you're looking at like, a specific sport with a specific following, it's a slightly different scenario. Hence why there aren't right now, to Wim's earlier points, 25 different 100,000 person arenas in the U.S. specifically to watch a title every single weekend, right? And I think that's because it's also the behaviors of people watching online, watching in different areas. So yeah, it's kind of an answer, non-answer, but it really does depend on where. But yes, I wish I could walk outside and just yell, who's a Cloud9, and like 1,000 people would come running to my door and say, oh my God, everyone at Cloud9, right? Whereas they might say, I don't know, wasn't that a song, right? Or something like that. But then you talk to a certain demographic, 100% they might say, I know what that is. I might not be familiar because I don't know, maybe I don't play League, or maybe I only play COD, or maybe I just love CS or Val. And those communities are actually very separate, right? They might be familiar, but they don't have the depth. And I think that's another generality that we sometimes often forget.
Wim, what's your take on the sort of the influence of influencers on the business? How do you view that?
It's a really good question, and it's a timely question. Of course, we've all seen the various pro leagues, pro teams, especially in the U.S., adopt content, creator strategy, creator approach to build their brand, to broaden their brand as well, and clearly there's something there. I think about I've been caught in both in a positive way and a negative way with comparisons to traditional sports with esports, and it's not quite the same thing. I think of, here's a good example. Troy Aikman, big star for Dallas as a quarterback. He really couldn't be an influencer broadcaster while he was playing. It took him to get out of his career in order to be that broadcaster, to be that influencer. And what's different about gaming is that while they're playing, they're also being creators and being influencers. So it's a little bit different dynamic in that regard. Back to the early days, I mentioned that we part of the ownership group of the New York teams, New York Excelsior and the New York Subliners, and as the New York Excelsior, the Overwatch League team was being formed, we actually had a discussion about that. What is our priority? Do we want to build personalities and build presence for the team on social media? How important was that? Versus, do we want the highest skilled players on the team? And that was in 2017 when the league started, but it was unanimous, and this also had something to do with who the owners were. They are the Wilpons, who used to own the New York Mets, and it was unanimous. He said, nope, it's all about the ring. We want the ring. We want to win. We want this, and ultimately, if we're winning, the rest will follow. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate. 76 years later, the teams are really leaning in on the value of an influencer, of a creator, and how it can help the teams. 100 Thieves have done it really well. FaZe has kind of done it up and down. But nonetheless, those are Overactive Media in Canada has done a great job with their 3 teams, one of which that plays in the LEC, the League of Legends European circuit. But So it's a really good question. It didn't for the team that I'm involved with. It didn't start that way, but they've done and pivoted heavily into creator work, creator support, building their presence through creators and influencers. So and trying to make those players that to Jason's point, especially New York Excelsior, it was all Koreans at first who didn't speak English, so really tough for them to be creators and to resonate with a U.S. North American audience. But so it's a really good question, and I think it really is a function of the region, of the sport, of the esport. That's it. That the players are but it clearly is a big role for creators and influencers to help esports.
One thing that I'd like to sort of build on what Wim was saying is the fact that I think influencers are really good at entertainment, right? They can frame something, they can make a spectacle of something. And, I'm Canadian, I say it to everybody. But the thing about it is, as a Canadian, one thing that always struck me about the US and American sports is the fact that everything has a damn narrative to it, right? You don't just watch the Olympics. You watch Simone Biles recover from, from the yips, right? You don't watch baseball. You watch Rick Ankiel. Is he actually going to, get it over the plate, or is he going to throw it behind, into the stands? There's always an angle. There's always storytelling involved with it. The very nature of esports makes that a little bit difficult. There's a lot of different, titles in the first place. It's delivered in multiple different modalities, right? You can watch it online. In person is not as much. There's no real durable sort of weekend home and home series. It's just really hard to manufacture that narrative. So, one of the things that I've always argued is that, if esports really wants to go prime time, although nobody cares about prime time anymore. But the thing is, if they really want to do it, it's got to be almost like the WWE. It's got to manufacture more storylines, more rivalries, and it's really got to go head to head. And manufactured drama does well in America. It does well internationally, and in fact, it's what influencers kind of specialize in. And so, who knows? I don't want to, esports turn into a drama factory. But at the same time, would it be good for ratings? Probably. Sad to say.
So switching gear here, but maybe this is a question that's coming in from our audience as well, and maybe this is for you, Jason, because you're in the educational industry. And the question is, it's an interesting one. It's about how universities, they can sort of strike a balance in the esports space between, on the one hand, educating students, and on the other hand, esports as players, sometimes jumping from one institution to another. And so, what's your take on what's going on here with respect to esports in universities?
I think that universities, like most industries, it's not immune to hype cycles, right? So the thing about it is, esports was one, AI is another, entrepreneurship is one, right? Ultimately, there's waves to it, and esports, hit that cycle for a while. I do think that there was a general sort of confusion about what that means, right? I think some programs have done extremely well saying, we're going to go competitive. We're going to build a team. We're going to use it as a recruiting tool. We're going to build a big club. We're going to actually go on the competitive side of things. But if and having been responsible for both, actually, in my previous university, I can say that confusion doesn't just bleed to the students. It also bleeds to the administration as well, right? Yeah. So the thing is trying to keep the administration focused and saying, hey, look, we're actually trying to build an educational program here, right? And we're not going to do game development, right? We're going to do esports business. All of that is a confusing sort of conversation. It's a constant educational process, not just the students, but also throughout the university structure as well, and keeping everybody aligned in terms of goals is difficult. And most universities, I have to say, do not have the expertise or frankly the faculty and staff to have that conversation, right? It's a long conversation. It's a constant conversation. So I think that for any university that wants to get involved, it really has to be an aligned structure, right? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to are we trying to attract students through our educational program? Are we actually just trying to build a club? If you're trying to build a club, it's a different calculation than trying to build an education program. And, the way that you engage with the industry will be entirely different as well, right? And there's nothing to say that you can't do both, but at the same time, that also requires resources, right? And so is the university willing to put the resources behind it and actually build both sides up at the same time? So, a lot of places, and Wim, you mentioned the HBCUs, and there's a lot of different universities that are spinning this kinds of stuff up. I would say it's fantastic. Students are definitely engaged, right? They do pay attention. They do all the, they are much more passionate about it. But if you're going to build it up, you actually have to. It's not a field of dreams situation. You can't build a ballpark in the cornfields of Iowa and expect people to show up, right? You actually have to have some heft behind it. You need to put some resources behind it, and you have to explain to people what's your secret sauce here. Are you going to be a better player at the end of the day? Are you going to be able to engage with the industry and actually, go into the business side of things? Are you trying to actually develop a video game? You need to be very clear on what you're trying to accomplish. And I hate to say, Henrik, I think a lot of institutions aren't very clear about that.
Any other perspectives, Matt or Wim, on this one?
I feel like Jason
Go ahead, Matt.
said pretty much everything. He's the subject matter expert on that. Look,
Yeah.
foundationally, obviously, we want to see more. We always want to see that as kind of that feeding ground. But the NCAA, what they do for traditionalized sports, they are not even remotely kind of there from a gaming and an esports standpoint. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to go, but there's just got to figure out your path, right? To the point, is it going to be competitive? Is it a club? Is it social? Like, how are you engaging together? And then the interscholastic politics, I will leave for Jason and yourself, Henrik.
Okay, yeah, that's for an entire panel in and by itself, I would say. Maybe switching gears, here's another question that came in, and that is maybe Win, you can see your perspective on this one. How much does local community gaming events affect esports?
Well, I number one, very important, and in just about every regard, no different than traditional sports. You think about, and back to my original comment about building a healthy ecosystem for gaming. I started playing Little League and I was 7 years old, and that was a very well established model even back when I was playing. Those models don't exist, for esports by and large. But back to the comment about what's been missing from esports and what got us to the point we are today. But local is a very important, local and regional, and again back to the my original premise that this all the esports realm got all of its momentum and built sort of in a homogeneous way across national, around countries, around regions. When I mean regions, I mean North America, South America, EMEA, Europe. And there was no local flavor. There was no local color. There was no regional color. And look at colleges, what they do. Where Jason in New York, NYU, or New Haven, or Alabama for that matter, how important those schools are to that region, to that locality, in order to build more engagement, to be part of the community. Those were missing. Those are largely missing from esports venues. We started building venues. Belong Gaming has 30 plus arenas in the UK, sort of suspended operations in the US. Long story. We'll get back on track here, hopefully shortly. But these were all to sort of capitalize on and help galvanize local energy for gaming and for esports. So it's a really important part. And you talk about the economic sort of supply chain for esports. Again, national, because everything was built nationally. These national sponsors, but a huge raft of local sponsors, regional sponsors that wouldn't be able to play at the national levels, but play very well at the local and regional levels. Local brands, bars and restaurants, car dealerships, things like that are really very, very much a local or regional sort of presence. Those are now getting involved in esports, supporting esports, and helping build the more grassroots, on the ground, local presence that has been largely lacking for years in esports. So it's a big. I maintain it's very important. And it's starting to now with and again, schools sort of at the center of all this, really helping to build that local energy. It's helping us get on a better path for health and wellness of this space.
There's another question here. Maybe it's for Matt. I would say it's an interesting one as well, about sort of social responsibility among, the publishers, game publishers, and the question is about gaming publishers. Of course, create leagues, but what is the broader social responsibility, and what are some of the examples of what is being done in the industry and in that dimension?
Yeah, it's a really great question, right? I think a lot of people will often just think of gaming and toxicity and say, that's it. That's it. Like either, same thing, like you might have parents now saying, I'm not letting my kids play football because they're going to get concussed and that's it. And it's all over, right? So I think that sadly, sometimes goes hand in hand. We know when people are competitive or doing it through these channels. One of the things that I'm like personally really proud of and things that we've done at Riot, and I do think, and I know other publishers have done similar things, is really working through some of that inclusivity, right? Like obviously we all have player support. People are monitoring things. They are looking at chat logs. They are looking at what's going on. It doesn't matter if you're playing a bot game in League. Someone's probably saying you're banned 2 minutes in for whatever it is that you did or didn't do, right? But that's on the one side. But I think beyond that, it's how do we create more inclusivity? We've done a lot of things corporately where we've brought in like Women in Game and done like a bunch of game dev stuff and have people come in and sit down with our artists and everything else. So really trying to expand that narrative. And then even on just the competitive side, some of the stuff that we've already done with Valorant, with Game Changers. Game Changers World Championships are happening in Brazil, cheap plug, in a couple months, which is really exciting. There's a partnership, a relationship that just was announced. Actually, I think it was either early this week or last week with Riot. Nas was speaking with Raj from MasterCard, and G2 is involved. We're really looking to try and create more opportunities for people that don't look like me, right? And kind of can get involved in the space and do it in a safe way. So I do think that there's a level of publishers trying to create some foundational pillars, but I think by the nature of it, like humans are humans, right? Not everyone is nice, as much as we hate to say it, and you can't necessarily, just because someone might be a bad word, quote unquote, like you can't necessarily be like, oh, that person's a jerk, like they're done, right? I mean, because that's personalities and stuff that way. But I do think foundationally there should be some thought and perspective to it, because that goes tying back to some of the things Jason has said and as Wim has said, like that's how the sport, that's how the ecosystem grows and expands, right? I do think that there's levels of that, but there's also areas where a publisher can only get so far before they might not be able to go too far because of other things that are kind of at play.
So we let's wrap up by going around the virtual room here and ask about 5 years into the future. What do you think is one important thing that will change about the industry from a business perspective? And what do you think that might be? So looking into the future, Jason, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty interesting question. I think my answer will stem from the fact that COVID was both a very exciting thing for esports because it was the only game in town, sometimes almost literally, but it was also pretty bad for esports in a lot of ways, right? I think it inflated expectations of what it could do, the audience it could deliver, and really, the problem is it tried to convince. That experience try to convince people that it's an purely online thing, that we're talking about the aggregate number of people watching, and it sort of disconnected it from community, like you were talking about, right? I think in 5 years, hopefully, there will be more local events. There will be more places for people to actually go and celebrate their fandom. That there will be an actual schedule. And I'm not really calling out right here. There's other publishers that actually do not tell you where their world championships are going to be until like the month before, right? I do hope that there's a more established circuit and ways for people to activate their fandom in a way that makes sense. And some of that is obviously going to come from the publisher and investments they make. But some of that is also going to have to come from community as well, and really people banding together and actually creating hubs of activity. And some of that did get lost during COVID times, and I think in some ways we're almost paying catch up for that. So that's what I'm thinking in the next few years. And will that lead to sustained growth? I hope so. I do think that without a strong local base and a chance to celebrate locally with people, that you're not really going to have much of anything. You're just going to continue to have a marketing exercise as opposed to a real growing entertainment option and sort of like tribal sport in your town or in your community, right? So I do think physical spaces are important. I do think education is going to continue to grow. I think places where people can celebrate their fandom and have touch points with their local communities, that's really going to expand and hopefully give that foundation that we've been talking about in esports.
Wim, short version. So the one thing, the most important thing that you think will change over the next 5 years.
I think, and we're keying in on purely esports. I believe, and as I've said, just about every time I've opened my mouth on this call, is that we will have a healthier ecosystem. It will be a sustainable model or set of models. It will be profitable. It will be viable. It will have expanded and broadened even further, not only scholastically, but in terms of social and cultural involvement in esports and gaming. I think the rise of more casual competition will also begin to take hold. That will also broaden the base and continue to grow engagement and involvement. So number one would be 5 years from now. I think it's going to take a couple years to get a healthier ecosystem, but within 5 years we'll be well on our way in that regard.
Matt, we give you the last word on this particular point.
I'll also try and keep it brief. I think I would put it under the umbrella of education and transparency. And I say that in the sense of we are talking now amongst this group, and it's also been noted, like there's always education, explaining the how, the why, how does the community system work? What does this look like? It's very much a fog of war. And as you see the younger demographics continue, like gaming is just part of who they are, right? I think we're going to see this not be I don't know, I'm concerned, it's crazy, I don't know what, to, in my mind, everyone knows or has a general understanding, like, hey, I like soccer, there's an AYSO, oh, that's really cool, let me go over to this Belong gaming area and I can start to play with my friends. And then you know what, maybe we all end up going to university and then we end up playing together and like go from there. So I think the education piece is really going to be very helpful for all of us to just make sure these like misnomers aren't thrown around as, oh my God, the world is ending, or here's a new season, or let's pick a new thing that is the esports, whatever. You can probably say that about every industry, but I think education is really key for us.
Well, I think it's time for us to wrap up. Really would like to extend a big thank you to everybody. Matt, Jason, Wim, thank you so much for taking a chunk of your day today to speak to our audience about business, esports, gaming more generally. Really learned a lot, and I hope it was very useful for our audience as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Dr. Ryan Terrell Sykes Sensei, and I'm super stoked to be joined here by Dr. Konitas to talk about some mental health and performance in the area of esports. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Excited to discuss about health and wellness here. So happy to have you all here and kind of get into that change of gears from the business side of things earlier.
Yeah, so Dr. Jane, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are in esports and how you got into it and all those kinds of little things before you jump into your presentation?
Absolutely. Thank you. So I'm Dr. Jane Caditas. I'm here, a physician at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. My training is in physical medicine and rehabilitation. And then I was also a physical therapist before going back to medical school. So I've always had an interest in, musculoskeletal disorders, orthopedics, things like that, and been a lifelong gamer. And I saw a definite need there, from the medical field to being able to treat these players and do research and all kinds of great things. So I'm blessed enough to have founded the Gaming and Esports Medicine Clinic here at Mayo Clinic to kickstart all this initiative in academic medicine and bridge the gap between academic medicine and healthcare and players.
Nice, nice. And I'm so sorry. I know my left ear is like killing everybody, or my voice is coming out of my left ear. I'm trying to fix that currently, so I'm sorry. I've been working in esports for a little bit. I specialize in working with collegiate players, professional players, and amateur players also. I've worked in League of Legends, Call of Duty, CSGO, Valorant, you've named it. I've probably played it all the way, or worked in it all the way to StarCraft 2. Yeah, I'm super stoked to be here, and we both prepared a little bit something for you. So, as they will say, Dr. Jane, take it away because I'm scared to go first.
Thank you, Ryan. So let me share my screen here. We both prepared, as he said, a slideshow here. So give me a second to...
And I'll just keep trying to play with these sound settings for myself. I'm hoping that... Oh, that's better? No? And Bowen sends his regards. Is so unlucky. He got caught in delayed flights, I believe. So he was supposed to be presenting with us today, but he is traveling currently. And Dr. Bowen Chung is a psychiatrist who's worked with professional athletes, I believe at Team Liquid and other known teams. And I think currently he works at UCLA, or one of his many jobs. So he's at UCLA now, but he wishes he could be here. So I'm going to say hi on his behalf.
All right, thank you. Can you all see my slideshow? Good. So the plan briefly in the next 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to go on a brief introduction of esports and gaming, which all of you or most of you here on the call know really well. Briefly, some injuries and prevention, talking about vision, digital eye strain and how it affects you, tips and tricks on how you can prevent that. Some physical activity and the importance of including some kind of activity in your day-to-day to improve performance and prevents injuries, as well as the importance of other lifestyle factors, and ending with some conclusion and key takeaways. So briefly, we all know, and we heard in the first part of the symposium, how big gaming and esports is. Despite hundreds of millions of people gaming around the world and thousands of esports players in the US participating, there's really a lack of research geared towards the medical side, best practices. How do we optimize players' performance? How do we keep people playing for longer and healthier and prevent injuries? And so the healthcare needs of this population, and all the players are really unmet at this stage. So there's an opportunity for the esports and the medical communities to collaborate to develop best practices moving forward. So we'll touch on some of the injuries and prevention strategies. So you've maybe all heard of overuse injuries. So why does this happen? When does it happen? When you demand too much of what your tissues are able to handle, they won't like it. And so that can lead to injury, repetitive stress, inflammation. That can be from excessive use of keyboard, mouse, or controllers, your phone. If you're not in an adequate posture, you're not using good equipment, that predisposes you to loading those tissues and getting injured. Or if you're not warming up before you're playing or you're not allowing recovery time, that can also lead to injury. Right. So we talked about how in traditional sports, that have been around for a little longer, there's more organization around this. And yes, if you're playing, and you're playing competitively and you're part of a team, it's very important to have routines and warm up appropriately and recover just like any athlete would, and to approach that. Um, Also, if you're having poor sleep and not eating well, that's also a recipe for your body not having the tools it needs to recover and build tissue after you've played. So we talked about the importance of good posture while gaming, proper equipment that is set up for you, stretch and stand or walk every 5 minutes every hour. If you can, take a quick break, stand up, stretch out. That can make a big difference long term, especially when you're playing many hours per day, every week, over the years. So it all adds up. Some key signs that can happen if there's a problem in any of this, you could start developing neck and back pain, or more commonly elbow, wrist, and hand pain as well. So what are the warning signs that you need to look out for? And I get asked this question a lot. When should I start getting worried? If you're starting to get muscle or tendon cramping and pain, that's not going away. Neck or back pain, again, that's not going away. Something should cue you. Things need to change your setup, or maybe you need to go see someone. If you're getting numbness and tingling in the arms or legs, that's also a sign that, hey, a nerve might be impinged. You might be dealing with carpal tunnel. Maybe I should do something about it. And of course, if it's getting in the way of limiting either what you're doing on a day-to-day basis or you're not playing properly, that needs to be addressed. So you may have all heard of gamer's elbow. And what that is an injury to the tendons on the outside of your elbow. If you had an injury over the top of your thumb, that would be called gamer's thumb. And so that's wearing and tearing that happens in the tendons over time, and inflammation in there from just overuse or not appropriate equipment set up for your anatomy. And so if you're doing repetitive activities like typing, playing, or other things, that can cause these injuries. And eventually, if you keep injuring it over time, tears can happen, which is why it's important to catch it early. So signs can include pain, tenderness on the outside of your elbow or on the outside of your thumb, pain when you lift your wrists or fingers, like when you're typing on your keyboard or your iPad or your phone, pain when you grip or twist something, weakness. Those are all signs you should seek some help. And I'm sure most of you have heard of carpal tunnel syndrome. So, what is this? When does it happen? Carpal tunnel syndrome affects 10% of the general population, but affects a lot more, persons who are on the computer or typing a lot or using their hands a lot. And so what happens is it's a nerve that passes on the front part of your wrist, can get pinched as it runs through there into the hand. And that nerve is important because it gives sensation to your three first fingers, your thumb, index, and middle fingers. So sensation and also strength. So when you're using your fingers too much, things can get inflamed in there and cause it to pinch. Other things you need to be aware of is if you're having symptoms like that aren't going away, going to see somebody to make sure you have nothing else going on, because sometimes it's just not carpal tunnel syndrome. Sometimes it might be a sign that you might have some diabetes that's not diagnosed, or there might be a problem with your thyroid. Symptoms of this would be numbness in the first fingers, and some people can report some shooting pain up in the hand or wrist, sometimes worse at night or after you've been working. And when it gets really bad, you can get weakness in the muscles and have weakness in the hand again, which is why it's important to catch it early. So if you're feeling any of that, make sure you reach out to somebody and talk to them about it. We're briefly going to go over gaming setup and posture, mostly for the computer, but all these principles kind of apply to anybody who's gaming on other devices as well. You want to make sure your head and neck are kind of lined up, looking straight in front of you, that your head's not tilted down for many hours at a time, because you're going to end up with neck pain, shoulder pain. If you're sitting in a chair, you want to make sure the chair supports the curves of your spine. You have lumbar support. And, ideally, the chair is going to be adjustable so your feet touch the floor, or you're sitting on a little footrest. Your arms and elbows should be close to your body, elbows bent at about 90 degrees, resting on the armrests or in front of you on a tray. Wrists relatively straight or slightly bent upwards. Some people find it more comfortable on a pad. And again, your keyboard and mouse is on the same surface and level, so you're set up. Monitor should be about an arm's length away, height at or slightly below your eye level, and your screen and your lighting setup should limit glare. Ideally, minimize blue light for later in the day if you have to game right before bedtime. So what should you look for in a chair? It has to be ideally adjustable. So if you can adjust it, that means you can make it fit better for your body. Either you need more lumbar support, or you're a little shorter and you need to lower the height of the chair, or you can adjust the armrest to set up properly. So why is this important? Well, this is the equivalent of your equipment, just like a football player going out with his shoulder pads and his helmet, right? If you don't have good equipment, that can lead to injury. So just because you're not getting tackled gaming, people think that, oh, it's fine. But over time, you do all these repetitive movements and getting these positions that can really cause problems. So we really want to prevent neck and back pain and overuse injuries, muscle fatigue, stress on muscles, tendons, and joints, stress on nerves that can lead to carpal tunnel syndrome. And actually sitting right optimizes breathing and blood circulation. So it's not just, preventing pain. It actually helps circulate blood better and help perform better and oxygenate better your brain and your tissues. So the setup is actually quite important. Another common complaint is vision or digital eye strain, something known as computer vision syndrome as well. It's one of the most common complaints that we know of. So the eyes get tired focusing on a screen. It could be a computer screen or your phone. So the easy rule is kind of the 20-20-20 rule. If you can, every 20 minutes, look 20 feet away for 20 seconds. That just helps your eyes reset. Blink your eyes. That helps moisten your eyes. And over time, that can help, prevent some of these eye strains and kind of eye complaints that we see. If you can't take a break for 20 seconds at 20 minutes because you're in the middle of a game that doesn't allow it, as soon as you can, take that break. Look further away. Don't just look on the screen, and take that moment to just stretch briefly. It adds up. The other thing is to consider going through a yearly eye exam. So we were talking about kind of the parallels with, more traditional sports and athletes. So if you're in college or in other programs or professional teams, typically we want to have a baseline at the beginning of the season that's tailored to you and the gaming that you're doing. So part of that is an eye exam and a screening. If you're having a hard time with your eyes, say something, go get an eye exam. Maybe you might need glasses or eye drops. So preventing this improves vision, focus, and performance, and prevents eye dryness, poor vision, and headaches. Sometimes that can happen. What are some warning signs? If you're having dry, itchy eyes, seeing blurry or double, or you're having trouble focusing on the screen, or you're getting eye pain or headaches, this might be a cue that, there's something to be done with your eyes. Maybe it's your monitor. Maybe you need corrective lenses or glasses. But these are the kinds of things you want to look out for. Physical activity is another big question we get often from teams and athletes. What should I be doing to improve my health and my performance? So what are the guidelines out there, the kind of best practices that have been put out there by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services? This was in 2019. So in general, you want to do either a moderate intensity activity for 150 minutes a week, or if you're doing more vigorous activity for 75 minutes a week. And that's the breakdown of about, if it's moderate, 30 minutes, 5 days per week, or if it's more intense, it's 25 minutes, 3 days a week. And this doesn't have to be all together, right? So we're all busy, we're all playing, we're all working and doing all these things. And gosh, you can't necessarily fit in a full 30-minute chunk. Well, that's okay. If you could fit in 5 minutes, we know that that adds up. So if you do 5 minutes here and there, that can add up at the end of the day and long term. So don't underestimate the power of doing what you can where you're at. Even if you have 2-3 minutes to do, it's better than nothing. So I always tell people to strive for progress and not perfection. So if you can't hit these marks, do what you can and start where you are. An easy, quick way to know, the activity, is it more moderate or high intensity? The talk test can help you with that. So while you're being active, try talking. If you're breathing hard but can still have a conversation easily, that's more moderate. So that's your light cycling or, fast-paced kind of walking. If you can only say a few words before you have to take a breath, that's more vigorous. So that could be more sprinting or, more vigorous kind of cycling, things like that. And that can just help cue you what kind of intensity you're doing. The other activities that are recommended are strengthening. So at least 2 days a week with breaks in between. And those are just general muscle groups. So as long as you're doing some strengthening, one example is push-ups or squats or jumping jacks or things like that with some weights. You're hitting a lot of muscles and you're going to get the benefits of activity that are going to pay off long term for your health, but also for your performance in gaming and esports. So this is really just a short list of what the benefits are. Any kind of activity has some of the best benefits out there. It trumps any kind of, supplement or other things. So don't underestimate the power of activity to improve your physical ability, reduce your risk of injury, improve your cognition, your memory, your mood, your sleep, your energy level. So don't underestimate it. So other lifestyle factors, sleep. Sleep plays an important role for anybody who's serious in gaming and esports and participating in activity. You want at least 8 hours per night. And if you're doing intense competitions, your body might need a little longer to recover. Try to limit blue light from screens at least 30 minutes before sleeping. This can include either filters or glasses out there. You really want to try to limit your exposure so your brain can shut off when you go to bed and you can go to sleep when you get in bed. Ideally, you'd have a routine that also helps, but the bottom line is better sleep means better recovery. And that's crucial to improve your performance and reduce risk of injury and burnout, and also improve your focus and attention. Another thing is considering your training periods. You can't be training 24/7 all the time, right? You're going to train a little harder when you're closer to competition or when it counts, but you also need to plan on recovery and breaks. And so that's also important in all of this. The foundation blocks for any athlete and good performance, including in esports, is really good sleep, good nutrition, and good hydration. So nutrition is a big part of it. Get a lot of questions on supplements. The bottom line is you got to have a good foundation nutrition where you're having complex carbs, you're getting your protein, your veggies, your fruits. The supplements that I recommend, or that you can kind of explore, are a good multivitamin to make sure you're getting enough of those basic vitamins, vitamin D, calcium, all that stuff, and avoid processed foods. If you're having persistent pain, lack of energy, having poor performance, these are all signs that maybe you should be working on your recovery. So to wrap things up, key takeaways. Good gaming setup and posture will lead to better performance and injury prevention long term. Recovery and breaks are just as important as training. Try to take a short break every hour. Use it as an opportunity to get in some activity for 5 minutes and perform other activities to improve your gaming performance. Don't underestimate the power of foundational blocks such as sleep, nutrition, and activity. If you are suspecting that you're injured or something's wrong, get help. There's people out there. There's only, from studies, only 2% of players with health problems will seek medical care. So don't be shy. And the top 3 warning signs that you should definitely consult a healthcare professional is anything that is interfering with your day-to-day activities, sudden drop in gaming performance, you're having aches, pains, muscle weakness, or numbness or tingling that aren't going away. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. I will stop sharing.
Dr. Jane, what I loved about that too is the 20-20-20 rule. And the first thing that I thought of is kind of like the Pomodoro technique that I try to help with students with studying or concentration and focus. And a Pomodoro technique, Pomodoro cycle is about 20 to 25 minutes if you want to start it and just be focused in that period of time. So that kind of lines up. Another thing that you really said that really stuck with me too is strive for progress and not for perfection. I think so many people, once they set this, like a system up or they try to do something but then they forget a day or fall off the wagon for a scene, they throw the entire routine out. So I love how it's like, just 5 minutes a day can actually improve and adds up over time. And that talk test, that's something I definitely want to try today as I walk my dog and hang out with my wife.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's so important just to keep it realistic and do what you can and start where you are. It's better than nothing, and keep building on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so I also have a presentation that I will show you, and hopefully, do I have to full screen this? Hold on. Okay. Oh, okay. Can I make it full screen? What's going on? I don't want the thingy. Let's see, how can I... Yes, you're absolutely correct. There we go. Thank you. So what's up? What's good, gamers? My name is Dr. Ryan Sparrow, Psych Sensei, and I'm here to tell you that esports, if you can believe it, is all in your head. And if you don't believe me, by the end of this presentation, I hope I can convince you. So if you want to check out that link, I'm pretty proud of it, I'm not going to lie. I can take you to everything. If you want to see my website, my socials, my LinkedIn, my TikToks, my Discord, everything's there. So if you want to check that out. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm so sorry I have to name drop these things, but I've worked in the professional realm with some organizations like OG, 100 Thieves, The Guard. So I've worked across the professional to Tier 1 to Tier 2 to Tier 3, all the way from collegiate. You name it, I probably worked with them. The only one I'm missing is high school. So if you're a high school and you want to work with me, let me know. I'd love to help you and your program. Not only am I a clinical esports psychologist, but I'm also clinically trained, and I hold a license here in the state of California. And shout out to you, USC and the Arizona State University. Miss you guys. All right. What if I told you that esports was all in your head? What would you do differently? How would you think about it differently? And what if I told you it all starts with a mindset shift? All right, so let's break it down. So when you think about esports, what I want you to think about is your frontal lobes. And if you want to play with your frontal lobes, all you need to do is karate chop about the middle of your head and right above your eyebrows. All of this right here is your frontal lobes. And what your frontal lobes are responsible for are planning, information processing, strategy, attention, impulse control, emotional regulation, stress management, all of these things. And I'm wondering, for you, like when you play your games or when you think about esports or trying to do your best in climb, what do you think is really important to think about or things to use or parts of your brain to do these things? And what you're thinking about is frontal lobes. And if you want another example, think about a team fight. Think about and execute in Valorant. Think about wombo combos where you want to push R a little bit too early, a little too bit late, or you're trying to go after the ADC and you're chasing after them, but then you're getting smushed. We're talking about impulse control. We're talking about frontal lobes. All right. Another area that's really active in esports is the amygdala. All right, so if you want to imagine the amygdala, I want you to imagine two almond-structured, small little pieces of your brain, like in the middle of your brain. And what these were designed for was to keep us alive. If you are a Rick and Morty fan, and I believe it's season 1, where it was like, they're like trying to keep Summer safe in the car, and all the car said was, keep Summer safe, right? That's exactly what your amygdalas do. They keep you safe. So consciously or subconsciously, they're scanning your environment for danger. And the sad thing, or the most interesting thing, is it can't really decide if it's like emotional danger or actual, this thing is going to eat me alive, I'm going to die danger. Danger is danger. And so the reason why it's amazing is because since it's constantly scanning all these things, it keeps us away from the scary things. So it makes us react with this flight, fight, or freeze response. And something that this is not really good for is all the other things. Information processing, the higher order level of thinking. All it does is, uh-oh, danger, scary, bad, and it makes you respond in a couple of different ways. So I want you to think that your brain is really smart. Oh, sorry, you are really smart, but sometimes your brain is kind of dumb. So danger equals danger, either perceived or real. Now, in the relation to frontal lobes and amygdala, let's put it into gamer speak, right? So let's talk about tilt. What is tilt? Basically, if you want to think of it from a frontal lobe perspective, tilt is just a hiccup, a short circuit, a blip in the functionings of your frontal lobe. And how that happens is either strong emotions, may it be happy, may it be angry, may it be frustration, sadness, whatever. Typically, these things hijack your brain and make you focus on whatever that experience is. And here's the thing, stress makes you stupid. That's right, stress makes you stupid. So when you experience too much stress, too much anxiety, too much frustration or worry, it shuts down your frontal lobes, which shuts down your ability to do all the higher order level of thinking. So put it simply, if your frontal lobe know we're good, you know think good, and you know esports bad. So if you want to think of it from a frontal lobe perspective, the person or player or even coach who's successful, most successful at esports, is who can keep the frontal lobes engaged for longer at a higher quality with fast enough speed. So if you're experiencing stress, there's a couple of different ways you can experience it. You can either experience it somatically. So some of the things that you might be experiencing may be sweaty hands, heartbeat increases, blood pressure increases, maybe you got the shakes. All of these things key into your somatic experience of the body. And then you also have a cognitive pathway of stress. The thoughts, the oh no's, the spirals you go into, the if this happens, oh no, into the future, because this happened, it's all terrible and we're going to lose. All of those thoughts also are experience of a cognitive in your mind of stress. So a quick test for you listening out there is, when you get stressed, when you get tilted, when you get frustrated, how do you experience it? Or even before you start playing, even before you start engaging in a competition for yourself, what are you experiencing? Are you experiencing the shakes? Are you experiencing the thoughts? What I want you to do is make sure that you keep notes of this, because there's different techniques for these different pathways. All right, and how does this affect you in your head? I want you to imagine a mental monobar. Everyone's familiar with the monobar or HP bar, and I love what Dr. Jane talked about, and all those things that she's talking about kind of lend themselves into that physical HP bar. Every movement, every click takes something away from your HP, and the way that you can regain all that power through your HP is taking a break, getting some rest, having good nutrition. All those things will increase and actually put things back into your physical HP bar. The same thing works with your thoughts, what you think. The decisions you're making, either how big or how micro they are, each of these decisions take mana. So if you get tired or you get tilted, the first thing that I suspect is you've ran out of mental mana and you're just you're fatigued, you're tired, it's time for you to take a break. You're making too many decisions, you overused this ability of yours to critically think, and sometimes you have to stop, take a break, maybe rethink about things, sleep, so you can actually add and restore this mana bar instead of continuing to deplete it. For example, other things can affect it too, like, are you hungry? Are you tired? Have you exercised today? When was the last time you moved? All these things, although yes, we'll put more points into your physical HP, also add to your mental mana bar too. So my question to you is, when you get tilted, when you get frustrated, have you just depleted this mental mana bar? And then at the same time, if you're getting upset at yourself, like, oh, why can't I play better? And you're getting mad at yourself for making poor decisions, it's kind of just like that. If you're playing in game and you can't push any of your buttons, it's not your character's fault. They just need to go back to get more mana. Now, something that I really, really want to emphasize is the difference between mental performance and mental first aid. Because everybody talks about mental performance. Ryan, how can I think better? How can I play longer? How can I think deeper and more strategically about my game? And the first thing I ask them is, hey, tell me about your sleep schedule. When's the last time you ate? Are you drinking water? When's the last time you touched grass? And they'll look at me like, what do you mean, Ryan? If I just keep playing more, I should get better, right? And I'm the bearer of bad news here, and I hate to tell you this, but you cannot have mental performance without mental health. And so when I start working with my players or teams and coaches, the first things that we need to tackle is the basics, the fundamentals. Because without the fundamentals, we cannot build on top of them. It's kind of like, for example, like a pyramid. The strongest part about a pyramid is the foundational piece, and we can build on top of that. Another example of this would be Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you've taken a Psychology 101 class, you go over these needs, and the first basis of that picture is food, water, shelter. Because if you don't have food, water, shelter, that's the only thing you're going to be thinking about is when's the next time I'm going to eat. In fact, that's so true that an entire company has made an entire series of commercials saying you're not you if you're hungry. So if they got it right, obviously, it has to be some truth to that. So if you really want to have mental performance, let's focus on building these structures, these routines, and these systems. And why I want to emphasize this is these structures, routines, and systems that you build also decrease the number of decisions you have to make. For example, do I have to go to sleep right now? Do I have to just play one? Can I just play one more game? I can just maybe skip on this class, or do I have to do this thing? All these little battles that you go through in your head take up mental mana. So instead, it's okay. I've set my bedtime. It's time to go to here. When I wake up, this is my wake up routine, and when I do this, I'm getting ready for the day. Okay, at this time I go to my classes. During this time, this is my sleepy routine, or this is my pregame routine, and this helps me get ready. So all these routines also not only ensure that you're able to meet your baseline fundamental needs, but it also decreases the number of decisions that you have to make throughout the day, so you have consistent energy and more energy to do the higher order level thinking, frontal lobe functions that you want to do in game. So again, if you cannot have mental performance without just mental health. And also something else I want to emphasize is when people talk about breathing and before the games and calming down, oftentimes they're talking about mental first aid instead of the actual performance piece, because we're just trying to put band-aids on these things because we haven't created a system to actually incorporate that into our routines to make that a piece of performance. So sometimes with breathing meditation, people get it twisted, and that's a first aid band-aid versus a piece for their performance. Now, when we talk about esports, what I want you to think about is I want you to think about skills. Something that's different in esports than in traditional sports is if I am 8 feet tall, I want you to try to stop me from dunking that basketball. You can try to do that, but if I'm bigger and I'm stronger, guess what? I'm gonna dunk that basketball. There's no way you can play defense on me because I'm gonna do that. But here's the thing about esports that's amazing. Esports to me is the great equalizer because we're not limited by your physicality, your body. Sure, maybe fine motor and your fingers and the way that you're able to click keys or touch a keyboard, fine. But something about esports that is more removed than traditional sports is you have to be able to think about it, understand it, get creative in it, have that foundation of knowledge, and then apply it in ways that are creative and flexible. And anyone can do this, and it comes with knowledge. And this is the thing about the skills is it's about focused intention, about learning, about practice, about doing all these types of things. So people ask me, Ryan, are IGLs born? Are you born a leader? Are you just born a mechanical god? Or can you actually create somebody? And I said, well, if you talk about being born with something, everyone has innate talents. That's just RNG role of your genetics, what you're able to do with your biology. At the same time, because esports is one step removed away from physicality, you can spend time, dedicated time, learning these different types of things that will help you improve and climb in your games. And skills can be grown. And again, if we go back to mindsets, using a growth mindset with enough time and effort, you can grow these things versus a fixed mindset of, that's it, I will always be hard stuck gold, this is my cap, and that's it. So you continuously grow and focus on your skills. You can improve. Now, that being said, I'm not going to say that it's going to be easy. I'm not going to say that it's quick, and it will take you on your own timeline and at your own leisure. But it is possible, and if you believe that, the rate of growth is actually faster. And when we talk about esports, it's structured learning. So I don't want you to think I'm just going to play a bunch of games and I'll get better. I mean, true, you will. But at the same time, when you think about growing skills, just like in school, just like in your job, or whatever problem solving, how intentional are you at focusing on the thing that you want to get better at? For example, CSing. How intentional are you at hitting those minions and learning the little nuances to hit them at that last second to get your gold? How vigilant are you when you're playing Valorant at the callouts or the peaks or where people can be and actually learning where the positions are to give you a shooter's advantage? Not just playing around, running around the map, because yes, you can be like a mouse and you will learn the map that way, but at the same time, if you actually focus your intention and figuring problems out in game, you will learn it more quickly, more efficiently. And if you can do that in a structural, intentional way, the better it will be. And I love what Dr. Jane said about having a balanced routine with taking breaks and standing up and drinking water. These are all really important because also, although you're not using your physical body, you are still contained within it. And if you want to think of your body as a vehicle in which you move through space, if your vehicle breaks down, if it has a missing tire, if it's got a missing windshield or a cracked whatever, it's not going to perform as well. And you can think of your body as a piece of equipment in the same way. So you need to take care of your body, which houses your brain, which allows you to do the things that you want to do in and out of game. I want you to think about esports in a sense of cognitive flexibility. And what I mean by that is that's another huge difference between traditional and esports, where, for example, it will always be 90 feet from home plate to first base to second base, and all the way around. That won't change. A football field will always be 100 yards, sorry Europeans, 100 yards across. That's not going to change. The arc is always, beyond the arc will always be 3 points when Steph Curry drains it. But here's the thing. In esports, because people will get bored of the game, they want to fix the game, things will break in the game, you have different metas. You have different patches. You have updates. You have hot fixes. What that would be like, okay, you know what, Curry today, he's scoring too many points. And so we're going to move back the 3-point line to just a couple inches past the half-court line, and only when Curry shoots the ball and he even makes it from there, it's only worth half a point. Or, you know what, they're not hitting enough home runs, so we're going to move the fences in a little bit. We're going to make sure that pitchers can only throw underhand, and this guy gets to use a bigger bat because he's smaller. That doesn't happen in traditional sports. It's the same every single time. But with esports, these things change. You have enchanters, you have engaged supports, you have sometimes ganking junglers, sometimes you have tank jungler metas. So all these different ways that the game changes, you also have to keep up. And if you want to keep up and be relevant in esports, you need to be able to apply your knowledge in different ways. But remember when I talked about systems and things like this and having a firm foundation, If you do not have a firm foundation or understanding of the game, you cannot be flexible. You cannot be creative, because creativity comes from having a solid foundation and seeing the patterns. And once you can see the patterns of the game, you can change them. You can manipulate them. You can break them. You can change the tempo of these patterns. And so, like Bruce Lee says, please be formless like water, shapeless. If you put it into a cup, it becomes the cup. If you put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You must put water in, if you put water into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friends. And so the reason I say this is because how many times people get stuck in their beliefs. You get stuck in your mindsets. The correct way to play the game is here. This is illegal. They should not be able to do this. And then it happens. And you're like, why did that happen? That's not supposed to happen. And you get tilted. Right? So every time this happens, every time you run into a sense of stuckness, you hit a ceiling, check your mindsets, check your beliefs. And oftentimes another way you can check this is the shoulds. Where do you get stuck in these shoulds? How should it have been? Why is it not these ways? Or whatever. And it's great. Sometimes when we get stuck, it's a good time to pause, see where we are, so we can start beginning to change that mindset to get different results. When you think about esports, I want you to think about relationships. And the thing about esports too is another piece of bad news is you don't exist. And what I mean by that is you are one step removed. You're not in the rift. You're not on the map. You are controlling an avatar that lives in that land. And if you don't know what that avatar's wants, needs, likes, dislikes, strengths, weaknesses, any of these things, you will not be good at esports. And why do I say that? Is because each champion, each character, each avatar is built to do a certain thing. And if you go outside of that thing and do the things I don't want to do, they will get blown up, they will die, they will not serve their purpose. Now, if you want to extend that a little bit more, your character is now not only playing this game in isolation, I mean, unless you're in a fighting game, or if you're in StarCraft, or whatever, when you're playing a 1v1, but if you're thinking about now a team, your character now also plays a function within this team composition and has relationships with these other avatars in the game that need to do their win condition together. Now, if you want to take that one step further, not only is your team comp have this relationship, but now when you run your team comp into an enemy team comp, there's interactions. And so now you have to consider the relationships between not only your team, but how your team interacts and is in relationship with the enemy team. Now we can take that one step further and think about not only in-game, but think about the people that you're next to, the people actually operating the agents, the champions, the avatars. And if you don't have a good relationship with them, or they think something differently about you in IRL things, they like you, they don't like you, they get angry at you, they get tilted with you, they laugh with you, whatever, that also affects the way they trust you, that affects the way that they see you, that affects the way they lean on you, and then affects the proficiency in which they pilot the avatar in the game. So the other thing I want to emphasize is looking through these perspectives. We're not even thinking about the game, we're thinking about people, we're thinking about relationships, and everything that you do in game, and you think about these relationships, it doesn't just apply to the people next to you, it applies to your friends, it applies to your families, it applies to your classmates, all of these things. So when you think about esports in this context, there's bigger pictures in how to apply it, not just in life or in game, but everywhere. So in conclusion, esports is more than just games. It's about learning, not only about how to acquire skills, not only about how to win at something, how to be successful in something. It's also about learning how to learn and being able to create these systems that help you consistently problem solve, consistently critically think, how to leverage your frontal lobes. It's about skill building. I mean, sure, clicking keys and being able to insect people and do crazy things online, but it's also about if you can learn how to create these systems, you can apply these systems anywhere, to your job, to your relationships, to other things that you want to do outside. Maybe it's picking up a physical skill, rollerblading, playing basketball, all of these things. There's so many transferable skills that you're doing in-game that can help you in life. And when you see yourself building these types of skills, being able to accomplish your goals, being able to push yourself forward, not only will you become more confident in your abilities, but more confident in yourself. The intentional seeing of how I built this thing, and this is how my process that I built it in, will also help decrease imposter syndrome. And there's so much imposter syndrome in esports. So you can actually use your ability in games to see the things that you're doing, to build that confidence to see, I know how to do this. I'm confident in this. I'm not an imposter. Obviously, critical thinking, all these frontal lobe things, understanding how your amygdala is affecting your frontal lobes and being able to take a breath, refocus, re-engage these bad boys so you can continue to push your win con forward. And lastly, what I love about esports is it allows you to live a more intentional life. Because something that I love in esports is we're talking about decisions. Everything in esports is a decision. Whether it was a good one, whether it was a bad one, we're all making decisions based on the vision that we have on the map presently. Of course, when we look at the VOD and we see with full vision, we can say, man, oh, I knew that was going to happen, or blah, 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 or because of this thing, of course it's going to happen. But hey, that's just like looking at a situation with 20/20 hindsight biased. What we can do, though, is understand, hey, we made this decision, and because of this decision, this happened. What's my next goal? What's my next step? How can I get myself back into the game? Or how can I finish this game and keep going? So, if you want to learn more about me or whatever, here's my website. I love working with players and students and people. And oftentimes what I love working with like players, coaches in esports is there's so many parallels in life. And oftentimes I ask the question of, you're going through this thing. Does this ever happen to you in real life? And they say, oh, yeah, it does. And so it's always fun to have these conversations with players and using esports not just to improve your performance in game, but how can I help you be an S-tier person in real life? And I think that's the real beauty in esports. It's not just a game, but it is, in fact, all in your head.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. What a great talk.
Thank you. That was really fun. Yeah, it's all in your head, and I love that you brought all the physical things out after doing it. Like, yes, this is great. Please do these things. And I love nerding out and talking about the mental piece. Absolutely, it's always so fun because the parallels of life and games is just a fun way to learn it.
Yeah, and there's so many parallels, like you mentioned, the foundations, all the foundations we talked about for physical health, a lot of them apply to mental health, and they're all interconnected. If one of those are thrown off, or if you don't have a solid foundation in the basics, that can throw your game completely off and everything else off. So I really love that. And adaptability, be like water from Bruce Lee.
Yeah, dude.
That's great.
And I think the best part too is you have to show yourself some grace, right? Because how many times when we fall down, either physically with our routines or griefing our sleep or whatever, and then we just feel so bad and we go into our guilt and shame cycle. It's all about getting back up, showing yourself some grace, and continues to move forward. Let's see. I think we've got some questions, I think, here. What do you think about, when colleges are starting programs, Dr. Jane, about mandating or making sure that there is a physical component within the program or requirement for athletes? What do you think about that?
Yeah, great question. I think here by Rufus that they were requiring the physicals for their esports players. So I'm not sure if they're talking about the pre-participation physicals or the physical activity requirements on top of that, but we're seeing a little bit about both, so I can talk about both. I would say if your program's offering you a preseason exam, like pre-participation, where they're checking you out, you should be so happy that somebody's offering that, and you have healthcare experts giving you a diagnostic and breakdown. Yeah, absolutely, about where your state is, where you're at, what you maybe need to work on. So please take that health check. And then if they're requiring physical activity, right now what we're seeing, because the esports world is, at least for the medical side, is fairly new, right? If we compare it to traditional sports, I think we've heard that from a lot of our previous panelists as well. What we're seeing is, a lot of these organizations or colleges or schools are kind of plugging in what's being applied or available for traditional sports athletes. And although the needs are different, I think we're not quite there yet to have those solid guidelines that are in the institution, and we're tweaking and changing. And a lot of it is coming from what we do with traditional sports and other populations. And so, I think the bottom line is, if you're having people who are interested and who are being a little thrown off by it, the way I see it is, if they're not serious about esports, I mean, the number one thing you could do for your health is probably activity. That is the magic pill everybody's looking for. That is it. So if you're going in esports or something else, take it.
I think to add on to your point, I think people forget that at the end of the day, we're still animals. Like, although we're sophisticated and we wear clothes and things like that, our biology, from our brain to our bodies, have not changed over eons, because it's just, we're animals. And so if we're not taking care of our body, or moving around or eating the right things, like, of course our cognition is going to go down too. Our quality of life in general is going to go down. Absolutely. Okay, and let's see, are there differences between esport athletes' needs and the needs of other professionals that sit in front of computers all day? I mean, I think that if we're talking about high performance, that's kind of an interesting, tricky question for me, because depends, I think, is the answer. And the reason I say depends is because if we're talking about high performers and what you're doing, you're taxing your brain, versus like an office worker who's just like mulling around their job, not really doing it intentionally, or trying to get to that next level and just trying to get done with the project, I think maybe it would be a little bit different. Because when you go into a training session with professionals, there are breaks involved. There are not just playing, but there's VOD review involved. There's team meetings involved where we have to talk about different problems and untangle them. And so, I mean, there are different needs because of the needs of the profession. So I think I would say it depends. But how about you, Dr. Jane? What do you think in those instances?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I do think for many instances, again, it depends on what kind of job the professional is doing on his day to day on a computer. But in general, I think the needs are usually a little different, the equipment that they use, and then just the context of what they're doing. The problem becomes that a lot of the medical literature and research we do have on, how long should you be sitting and what are you doing and what are the effects of this, are for people who type or casually on the computer. It's not somebody who's doing that many clicks and that many fine motor movement and ramping up as much cognition. So we do know there are some differences there in the demand and the loads. And so, yeah, I would say at the end of the day, there are probably differences that we don't know, we don't fully understand yet, and we just don't know what we don't know. And that's part of why we're all here today.
And sometimes esports athletes, especially professional ones, don't want to participate in the studies because they're working all day and I have to run through the study, and it's just another thing we have to do. So if you're research out there and actually get pro players to sit down, fill out a survey, or actually do a research study, like, that was sick. Good for you. That was amazing. I got one more. I wonder if people with disabilities and neurodivergent players will find a belonging in esports and local communities. I think so. I think that's another thing that I love about esports, is that there's a lot of different communities out there that celebrate differences and allow different communities to play with each other or celebrate those differences in their unique ways. Also, I think there's different companies focusing on even different ways of engaging in your esports, for like adaptive gaming controllers or other ways for people to participate in gaming. At the same time, I think people with neurodivergent differences, something that's really important is understanding how your brain thinks, how you think, your needs, and then finding ways where we can promote your learning or helping you perform your best. I think that's what I think about it. How about you, Dr. Jane?
Yeah, Great points. We're in my field, specialty physical medicine and rehab. So I've kind of moved away primarily from that population, but we still see a lot of those patients with spinal cord injuries or people who have had amputees or traumatic injuries that can no longer do the physical things that they used to do necessarily. And gaming and playing is a way for them to be involved and to find community. And there's been more and more focus on this, and I definitely think that this has been growing. I know in our region, Rochester, and within Mayo Clinic as well, our therapists have been involved in that and growing that, and there's local groups that host events. So it's so exciting to see that kind of growing. So I'm hopeful in the future for all these populations, and people. It's a way to engage and connect with other people and engage your brain as well, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's something that another like discussion that I've also heard too, where people forget that gaming has changed and evolved over time instead of an Atari where like a person is playing Pong by themselves or maybe with another person, or just going to the arcade and it's a one-player game. I think people forget that instead of connecting at the malls or whatever, or at the stores or at the parks, now people are going home and being able to connect with their friends and do this activity together. And it's not just a single player experience, but now it's a social event that people do every single day. And I think that's what people forget. It's like, oh, they're just wasting their time. Like, oh no, they're actually connecting and playing with people, kind of like how maybe, I don't know about you, when I used to go home and go type with my friends on AIM, like AOL Instant Messenger, my mom was like, why are you on the computer? It's like, oh, I'm talking to my friends. They're like, oh, just call them. And it's like, that's weird. But instead of that, now we have gaming. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there was some comments in the chat about maybe coming back to the question on the physical pre-participation. So it was more about the college, unfortunately, requiring it but not offering the resource for that, is my understanding, and that sending the players off to have to find somebody to do it. And that's really unfortunate that, the school wouldn't provide that. Because typically, we'd want to get the school engagement and your local health groups to be involved and have a connection to come out and do those pre-participations. So hopefully, that's what we see in traditional sports, at least for the most part. So hopefully there's a way to champion, that this is important for you as well. So I can see how that would put some people off to have to go find somebody and maybe pay out of pocket. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have a question for you. I'm just curious. So, of like a physical, an eye exam, the dentist, all these like basic checkups, what would you think the prior list would be for somebody to make sure that they are able to check in with these things, like first, second, third, or if there's like close enough? Like, what would you think the order would be?
Yeah, great question. So I think the basic things, right? So like we talked about, so how much they're sleeping, what are they eating, what is their baseline medical conditions? Like think we don't think about, right? Or what are they drinking or smoking? So there's kind of baseline questions I think that are important that we tend to forget. And so the general health checkup is just as important, right? Because if you have a general small issue, that's going to throw off all the extra stuff. So that's the basic part of it. And that includes heart, lungs, just a checkup, are you dealing with some problems you might not be aware of. Then probably in order, what we hear about some of the more common complaints is really eyes. So definitely getting your vision checked, I would say, was probably high up there. And then after that is spine and upper body, right? For more traditional kind of esports, computer based or joystick based. And so just a quick check line, what's your motion look like? What does your strength look like? What's your sensation? Is there neurological damage? And going into that, are you having tingling? Before we even start this season, do you have carpal tunnel syndrome that needs to get addressed before you start gaming 8 hours? And then going through people's training schedule, I think, is another big one as well. So how much are you playing, not just for your sport or your team, but what are you doing after hours? like you mentioned, a lot of people see that to connect, right? So if you're playing a different kind of game after hours, because that's your way to connect and socialize, you're still straining all those structures and adding loads. So I think asking about those extracurricular kind of outside activities, because a lot of esports players will game outside of, just their
True, yeah.
competitions. And then what are your thoughts on the
Absolutely.
mental health side? What should people be looking at for these pre-part?
First of all, go to therapy. Go to therapy. Everyone should go to therapy. Whatever. I think you mentioned something really interesting where if you have some type of mental health diagnosis, oftentimes that creates a lens in which you play through or how you think about things. So perhaps if you have a diagnosis, thinking about, oh, how does this affect the way I play my game, or think about my game, or respond to my game and things that happen inside of it, and then go back to therapy. Or go to a psychiatrist if you would like to see a medical professional about it. But also oftentimes the best treatment is seeing a psychiatrist and a psychologist in tandem, because one will help the medical side, the other will help the behavioral skills, and together we can help you to be your best person. But go to therapy. That would be my first and foremost suggestion, especially if you're at a university, you have a center, it's free. I take things that are free, do that. So yes, that's my shout out to therapy. But I noticed that we're running out of time, Dr. Jane. So how can people reach you if they have questions about their physical health or want more information? Like, how can they contact you?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So, you can reach out directly and check our website out at mayoclinic.org/esports. Our email is there, our contact info is there. So I'm based in Rochester, and we have our teams out in Arizona that are also seeing patients, but we all do virtual visits. Our email is there and phone number. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or you need to get care and you want specialized care. Besides me, we have a huge team we can connect you with for other healthcare issues. So I'm always happy to make that connection as needed.
Nice. And if you have any questions regarding mental health, performance, esports, whatever, you can reach out to me on my website, psychsensei.com, or psychsensei on Discord. You'll find all my things that you need on my website. But I just want to say thank you so much to UCI for hosting us and allowing us to talk about our passions for mental health and performance. And thank you for nerding out with us this afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. This was great.
Bye.
All right. Thank you all for joining us and sticking around today throughout this afternoon. A huge thank you to our speakers, our staff, our volunteers, all those who supported this event. It is our hope to make this an annual program and to invite experts to discuss important topics to our world of esports. I certainly learned a lot and hope that many of you did as well. If you have suggestions for future topics or any comments or questions, please let us know. Coming up next for UC Esports Invitational or UC Esports Initiative, we have our invitational competition kicking off next Friday, October 27th with our online qualifiers. We hope you come check it out and cheer on your favorite schools. And with that, on behalf of the UC Esports Initiative, Fiat Lux, let there be light, and have a great rest of your week. Goodbye.